My name is Sharon Gill. I'm an associate professor in biological sciences. My main research interest is to understand how animals respond to human-induced environmental change. So it's a really broad kind of question. So our specific question looks at how animals communicate in noisy conditions. So my interest in this research began really early on with a love of animals, and I wanted to have a career where I studied animals, and I didn't want to be a vet, but I knew I liked being out in nature and figuring out what animals did in their daily lives. So it started with that interest, and then the building concern with thinking about how the environment was changing and how that might affect animal populations. So it's been a long kind of journey towards this specific question that we are addressing now, but it's really been motivated by this love of animals and wanting to understand what it is that they do and how they make their living out in nature, and then how we might be affecting that by how we're changing the environment, whether that's in regards to light or noise or climate change. The goal is really to think about that in terms of the behavior in terms of a conservation implication. The big part for the animals themselves is that those sounds that they make have a specific purpose, and they use those calls and songs for breeding. So without those songs, they can't breed successfully. So it's a really important part of their daily lives to be able to sing and to advertise and to call for mates. Our concern is to explore how then noise might affect their ability to use those calls that have a really, really important function, right? They have to use those to define their space that they use for breeding, to attract a mate. And if noise affects those things, then they could, as individuals, have low reproductive success. They might not breed successfully. That translates into potentially a population problem. So if individuals within a population can attract mates, they can't breed successfully, or they breed less well, then that might mean that the population starts to decline. So in terms of kind of connecting what goes on at the individual level, how they might approach or solve the problem of communication and noise, really we can then start to weave that into thinking about populations and how they might persist over time in noisy environments. So it really is all tied up with conservation of those species in nature. What we're finding is that animals that we've studied have an ability to alter how they sing or how they communicate depending on the noise that they're experiencing, and that's pretty exciting. That one possible solution for these animals who are living in noisy areas is to change how they communicate, and we have evidence that that's what they're doing. The next step for us to link up that initial finding with the question of whether these animals will be able to persist in the future is to connect the changes that they make with how successful they are when they reproduce. And so we're working on addressing that big question right now in some of the work that we're doing. So we've had really exciting results in terms of these animals are able to change how they signal. We just have some unknowns that we're still pursuing to be able to get the full picture. Some of the other work that exists on this question suggests that not all species can adjust how they signal and how they communicate in noise. And so it's also going to be important to target some of those species to understand why they are not able to adjust how they communicate and how that might affect their reproductive success and then their persistence over time.